Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm so glad to see everybody's faces. This is lovely. It's like old home week with CRLS especially. I hear we've got some alums in the audience and in the presenters. So thank you so much for being here. For those of you who I don't know yet, my name is Beth Folsom and I am the program manager at Cambridge Historical Society. And I am thrilled to be facilitating tonight's program. We are so excited to be embarking on this great relationship with Cambridge, Rindge, and Latin, and to really get the perspective of the teens, the high school students in our midst, and make sure that they know what a valuable voice they have and how much we want their experiences. We want to hear them, to document them, to preserve them. And I'm just thrilled to be able to bring these stellar young people and their teacher to you this evening. So I want to say, first of all, I want to thank all of you who have especially given us a little financial support. These are free programs. We love doing that. It's very important to have equity of access to everybody, but we do depend, of course, on your support. So I want to thank especially those who made a contribution for tonight's program. You've helped us bring it to you. So one thing I did want to ask, just as a show of hands, we do like to do a quick kind of taking the pulse of our group before we get started. I'm curious to know who among you, and you can either do that on the reactions down at the bottom of Zoom, or if you're live on camera, you can raise your hand. Who among us has a teenager in your life, a high school student that can tell you what teens have been going through during the pandemic? Who knows firsthand? I have a 16-year-old, so I definitely know. All right, and so some of us do and some of us don't. So these young people have very kindly agreed to be our informants on what's going on in the teen world and how they are experiencing the COVID pandemic in Cambridge. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to introduce Benji Cohen, who is a teacher at CRLS, and he is going to be our facilitator talking to our teens this evening. So Benji teaches world history to 9th graders at Cambridge, Rindge, and Latin, and he's developing a new course on current events that is launching in September. He just finished his 2nd year at CRLS, and previously he taught in the Oakland, California Unified School District, and he is also a CRLS alum. So Benji, thank you so much for being here, and would you please introduce us to some of your students?
Totally. First, I want to say thank you to you, Beth, and to the Cambridge Historical Society for having us. It's super awesome for all of us to be able to sort of push outside of our classrooms. I also want to note that I'm super stoked tonight to have students that I taught, but also students that another 9th grade teacher who's also joined us tonight, Kanku Kabongo. So her students are also here and provide a totally different perspective, and I think that will be super awesome to hear from multiple classes. So I'm very stoked that both Kanku's here in the audience, and because I learned from her and that her students joined us. So without further ado, I think for our students, what'll be easiest is if I'll just call you by name based on the way I see you on our Zoom. I'm gonna ask you to say your name and give us as a group one word to just describe your remote learning experience. And that's sort of that'll be our icebreaker. So Cedra, why don't you go first? Your name, well, I guess I just did it, and then one word.
Hi, I'm Cedra. One word that I would describe social distance learning would be difficult.
Luke?
Useless.
Esme? Esme, I'm not sure we can hear you.
Yeah?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Esme. I'd probably say different.
Different. Grace?
Hi, my name is Grace, and one word that I would use to describe remote learning, at least last year, was condensed as far as the curriculum goes.
And lastly, Mariella.
Hi, Mariella. I would probably say it's boring.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So Esme and Grace, I'm going to toss you the first question. So maybe Esme, you go first, and then Grace right after. Can you all speak a bit about the pandemic creative projects that Ms. Kabongo assigned to y'all? So maybe Esme, could you start by talking about what the assignment looked like overall? What was the process? And then Grace, talk a little bit about what you created after she's done.
Yeah, so we did a project to sort of, first we did a little bit of research about like what other people are, what people are like experiencing and what their experiences are with quarantine or social distancing or anything like that. And then we used that data to do a project about, to sort of show some aspect of quarantine and social distancing.
Awesome. And Grace, what did you make?
So I decided to make a visual art piece, and what it was basically a painting with a child standing in a dark room with light coming in through a window and kind of reflecting onto some various school supplies in the background. And what I was kind of trying to convey with that was the effect of social isolation and remote learning on particularly young students. I kind of just wanted a simple way to express the overall situation of remote learning for young people. And the research that I did for this project shows that COVID-19, going beyond just health and wellness, has repercussions in the overall stability and development of students. And yeah, that was just kind of how I wanted to portray that. Yeah.
And Grace, did you feel like we were at school and then we weren't at school, right? So it was like this super drop of a hat transition. How did that feel when you went from sort of a normal Tuesday and then the next day you never went back in the building?
It was interesting because it kind of, like you said, like a very abrupt transition. But for me, it was weird because it was kind of like going from full-time school to kind of like halfway or in the middle, and then to summer. So like usually we go straight from full-time in school to just out of school. But this time it was weird because it was kind of like gradually transitioning to summer. And during that in-between period, yeah, it just, learning didn't feel as efficient, and it just felt like it was lacking the in-person aspect of it. And yeah, unfortunately, I don't really know what the solution to that would be, but hopefully this coming year we can try to create a nice, effective solution that will work for every student.
And Esme, what was your creative project? What did you end up making?
I wanted to show sort of that there was a change in ideas and thinking because of coronavirus. And so I took 5 or 6 photos of just sort of normal things about our world or our life, such as like a grocery store, a hockey game. I used Harvard Square, a classroom, and then like sort of made a collage out of it. So it was, I printed out a black and white photo and sort of cut pieces out of it and colored them in and sort of put them back in maybe like upside down or backwards or something to sort of show like a little bit of a change in sort of everything in our world.
Awesome. Thank you to both of you. Mariella, could you talk a little bit before you talk about your creative project itself about the same thing that Grace was just sort of getting at, that abrupt transition from school to not school. And if you remember, could you talk a little bit about like those first few weeks when there were literally zero expectations or sort of clarity on what school was going to look like because no one knew?
For me, I don't know if I would say it was like abrupt. I was very at peace with the decision to like close schools. I didn't really care that much at the time. But for like school, there wasn't really any work being put out, and we weren't like, no one was really telling us anything. So I would like spend the day on like FaceTime with my friends, and we would like play like Uno and stuff like that. But the fact that I was like spending like weeks, like hours and hours for weeks, like on FaceTime instead of doing like actual work was kind of dumb. The only like work I did was, I wouldn't call it work, but like Mr. Cohen was like, oh, write in the journal. And we had like a class journal. But that, I wouldn't really consider that work. It was just like something to do to like keep up with everyone else's lives. So yeah.
Cool. And then Mariella, what did you end up creating for your creative project?
I made an app about coronavirus and like informational stuff and things like that. And it was like not really like, I wouldn't market the app towards like adults, but it was like kind of like a simpler app, maybe for like an elementary kid to like understand what was going on. And it had like examples and like a timeline of like when Corona first started, like around like early November, and like links to external websites that you could like view while in the app, and just like things like that, so that it would be kind of like an informational source, but it needs to be like updated. It hasn't been touched since like March, but yeah.
And how was your process doing that? I mean, I don't know how to code at all, so I imagine it sounds hard. What was it like for you to sort of do that completely independently?
It was a little like frustrating, but I had like done an app building competition last year, so I kind of had some background, and I like texted the girls that I did it with, and I was like, hey, do you know how this thing works in Thunkable so that I can do this? And things like that. So I wasn't doing it like completely alone, but it was like for little things, like when there's like a lot of like coding, like I needed to make sure this. It just took a really long time because I kept like testing it and trying to see how like it would be for someone else that wasn't me to like go through it. But yeah.
Thank you. And Luke, one of the things that I'm super glad that you're able to make it tonight, because I think just remembering back to March, you were so clear-eyed about like the loss of social relationships with, as I'm thinking about you and your boys. So I was wondering if you could talk, before you talk about your creative project, talk about what that was like to sort of go from seeing your friends in school all the time, every day, to sort of not necessarily having that same connection in person, and how you, what did you substitute it with?
Well, I substituted with it for playing video games or FaceTime or texting. Um, it was pretty weird, but I didn't really think too much about it because I thought it was going to be the 2 weeks that we were meant to be gone for. But eventually, time went by, and we kind of started hanging out at like parks or stuff, 6 feet away with masks. But it was a pretty big change going from every day going to school, seeing everybody, to staying at home, not seeing anybody. But I mean, I was mostly fine with it, but it did kind of drag on for a little. It's dragging on for kind of a long time, so I don't know.
Totally.
And then for my creative pandemic post, I also made a art piece, and it was an earth, and it was cracking, and in those cracks you could see pictures of how it had affected us, like pollution levels, which I mainly focused on because I wanted to show that although it's, as we all know, it's already affecting us so massively in a negative way, I also wanted to show how it was also had positive effects. So that's what I did.
Totally. And finally, Sidra, I was hoping, because I know I always loved reading your posts in our live journal that Mariella mentioned. So could you talk a little bit about what that was, and what it was like to sort of keep up with people on that document, and then also talk about your creative project?
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, as you probably already figured, Mr. Cohen put together this journal, and so a lot of us would like add snippets of, like, I don't know, random things, part of our day, what we were experiencing, like frustrations involving school, like it was actually really fun because a lot of times people would like respond to like things that you said, like, or like left a comment on what you said on the Google Doc, and like you'd reply to them, and like it was actually, like, for a while one of the only social interactions I had for a while, because there was a lot of struggles because a lot of my friends had different schedules, and I had a lot of teachers giving me a lot of work, which seems to be kind of weird. I mean, not weird, but I mean, a lot of other people did not get as much work as I did, which surprised me a little bit. But like, it was really fun because like people were wishing each other a happy birthday. And we were all like talking about like similarities, like differences in our day-to-day lives through the document. And it was kind of a way to like stay connected with basically school people, I guess. I guess that's the simplest way to put it.
Totally.
So yeah. And then for my pandemic post, I made a drawing, a digital drawing of a woman wearing a mask, with, I think at the time, the countries with the largest coronavirus patients, which at the time were Spain, Italy, China, and the U.S., not in that order. And with the coronavirus kind of surrounding her in front of her and behind her, I was trying to convey some sort of chaos and kind of like trying to find the calm in the chaos. But yeah, that's what I did.
Cool. Thank you. Grace, coming back to you, I realized listening to Cedra that I actually never even had anyone of y'all talk about what our schedule was actually like. So could you, and maybe it's like you just want to forget it forever, which I completely understand, but if you remember, could you talk a little bit about, particularly as a ninth grader with a silver black schedule in the building, what was your life like as a student? So what did a day look like during quarantine? What were you expected to do?
Sure. So basically for each individual class, we would only have like maybe one meeting per week. And especially as a ninth grader, with alternating days of history and English, we would have 30-minute blocks of each class, and they would be adjacent to each other. And so, yeah, and with other classes which didn't alternate day to day, we would have like an hour of time per week. And then the rest of the week, the work for that class would be like individual. So yeah, that was pretty much what it looked like.
And Grace, what does it look like when we're in school?
Well, you have 4 classes a day, and you have ELA and history alternating every other day, and each class is around an hour and a half long. Yeah, so a big difference.
Thank you. And Esme, could you talk a little bit about, so this pandemic creative project, the sort of emphasis that Ms. Kabongo and I, when we were thinking about it, was like creative, right? So you can do anything you want, which for some people, like for me, would stop me in my tracks and I wouldn't be able to even begin to think about what I'm going to make. So how did you come to decide to do a photo collage? What was your intellectual process that brought you there?
Yeah, so I actually had a pretty hard time coming up with what I was gonna do. And I knew I wanted to do something about like a change in thinking, but I had a really hard time coming up with how to sort of show that. And so I actually ended up talking to my mom about it, and we sort of had a discussion about our ideas, and it was her that came up with the idea of like taking photos. and then I sort of use that to come up with an idea of sort of how to change the photos and
awesome. And this is sort of a question for any of you, all 5 of you. In school, it's really easy. Like, you need help, you sort of know what to do, right? You can go to your teacher's classroom, you could stay after school, come before school. During the pandemic, if you need help, so you're stuck on your pandemic creative project or whatever it is, how did you go about getting help? And who did you ask? And how did you ask? And was it hard?
Can I answer or?
Yeah.
For me, there was like a few teachers. Like one teacher, I insistently had to email her multiple times a day, and stuff like that. And then there was like a gym teacher who didn't know when this class was supposed to be, and a geometry teacher who just really you'd email him and you'd get like an automatic response saying like, this is only for like parents and caregivers to email me, like just ask me in Google Classroom, and you'd ask in Google Classroom and he wouldn't answer. So when I really had problems, I'd ask my CM teacher because she was like fantastic, and she would like get on it like right away and like email them and be like, hey, and just in like a way that would make them finally pay attention. But for people who didn't have close relationships with their CM teachers, or like who didn't have a CM teacher that would just like do it right away, a lot of them were like complaining about it and that it's like really hard to get through to teachers. It was like already hard to get through to certain teachers, but when you only have like emails and your teachers are like, oh, my email's flooded, like it's like homeroom. It's the 15-minute block after first period. And yeah, that's it.
So Mariella, just to sort of like clarify, essentially you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, that like your personal relationships with your teachers really impacted how you were able to get and receive help?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any of you, the rest of y'all, what about this idea of how did you get help?
Well, usually I would just email to meet up at a set time, and it was honestly kind of more flexible than getting it was much more of a flexible timeline, because you pretty much had the entire day that you didn't have a Zoom. You only have 1 or 2 a day. So besides having to email them and rather than just going up to them in the middle of class, it was pretty, like, I find it kind of easier. So
yeah. Anyone else? Anyone else have different strategies? If not, I'm really interested in this idea, and I think everyone else would also be, of flexibility that Luke just mentioned. So one of the things that was fascinating about pandemic school is like the school day, as we always knew it, of 8 to 2:30, like, see you later, that went out the window. So how would you, Grace, let me start with you. What do you think about that idea of flexibility? Did you find yourself working at different times, meeting with teachers at weird times? How did that work out for you?
I think that in theory it was, good, potentially beneficial. It allowed me a lot of extra time to do pursue other things. But for me personally, it definitely left a lot of room for me to procrastinate. And, I ended up leaving a lot later. And personally, I think I, as a student, benefit from having a more structured class. But I do think that flexibility is definitely something to consider, because we have the opportunity to do so. But I think it's also to try to maintain some sort of structure. But yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else about this idea of structure versus flexibility? Cedra, what did you think about that?
I personally like the flexibility because it gave me time to do my things, but also I also have a problem with procrastinating. So I needed I needed to give myself some sort of schedule, like a loose one, but not like I do well with like a flexible schedule, I guess. So with the whole entire staying at home, it created a space where I could create my own schedule to help me work out what is best for me. So there was a little bit of plus and minuses that came with it. So yeah.
Totally. Mariella, Luke, or Esme, anything on structure versus flexibility?
Yeah, I think like I agree with what Cedar said. I think for some people it's easier to have like a really tight schedule, but other people work better with flexibility. So I think for some people who might need that kind of structure, it might have been harder. I personally worked okay with a more flexible schedule, but I know that some of my friends had a really hard time like trying to figure out how to get their work done or whatever.
Totally. I'm super honored now to turn it over to Kanku Kabongo, who is going to ask, she's also a ninth grade world history teacher and has a question for our students.
Hi. So I'm super interested in this thing that came up, I think, between Mariella and Cedra. Earlier, you're kind of talking about very different experiences with work during this time. And I think someone else mentioned like teachers not really assigning anything. And I think we're in this, a lot of my students at the end of distance learning were like, I don't know if I really learned anything. School was cut short. And so I guess my question for you is, what do you think was the most important thing you did learn once we transitioned out, like once we transitioned into like distance learning? And like Cedra, you're talking about, I think I just heard you kind of talking about learning to like balance your own schedule, which is like one thing. So could anyone speak to something you think you learned, like the most important thing you learned during this time?
Awesome. Let's put Mariella on the spot. Let's make her go.
I already unmuted, but okay. I would say I learned to write like more assertive emails to get my point across, because before I was being like too passive, like, oh, like if you like have any time left over and stuff like that, like, but it just came to the point where she was like emailing back like past deadlines and stuff like that, and it just wasn't really working out, so I had to be more assertive in my emails.
Thank you. Grace, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think as far as things that I learned during remote learning, I think one of them would be, I think, well, this kind of contradicts what I said before because I was like procrastinating, but it did also help with my like just planning and organizing all of my work. So yeah, I think that'll be beneficial for next year.
Awesome. Luke, what about you?
Wait, what was the question again? I forgot.
What'd you learn?
Oh, right. I learned how to learn better on my own. Not having to rely on a teacher who was meant to teach me something that they couldn't.
Awesome.
You were fine, Mr. Cohen. I don't have anything. You were great. You were great.
You could talk smack. It's okay. Esme, what about you?
I don't know, this isn't really related to school, I guess, but I feel like, at least for me, being home with my family was really valuable to like get that really connection with my family. And I feel like I learned a lot from being around them, especially like there's a lot more time to like cook meals together. And I feel like I've learned a lot about like even just cooking or something like that, like just about like being at home. There's a lot more time at home to do a lot of things like that.
Mm-hmm. And Cedra, can you give us another besides balancing?
Yeah. Besides balancing, definitely learning how to communicate with others on via emails, and whatnot. Especially learning how to properly convey my struggles and what I'm trying to learn, and definitely reaching out and getting external resources to help me complete my work. And
Awesome. So before I sort of turn it over to public questions, I just have one more. I love y'all, Mariella, Luke, and Cedra, who are in my specific class. We also did this assignment called the Pandemic Post, where we wrote sort of like our own newspaper kind of magazine type deal. So Mariella, can I start with you and ask, what did you write about? How did you decide to write about it? And yeah, what was your process?
Okay, so what I wrote about was, so I had like two different paragraphs about like two different things. But like the first thing that I wrote about was gambling. And I wrote about like how a lot of like sports gamblers had turned to political gambling, like for the 2020 presidential election, and how like sports gambling had gone down 80% from March 19th to March 2020, but political gambling had gone up 200% since January and February. And then for my second one, I compared Corona to Ebola and how it affected certain African countries where there was like a huge spike in teen pregnancies because girls didn't have like the access to Planned Parenthood or birth control and things like that. Because like while in quarantine, you just can't access those things as easily. And then the last thing that I talked about was like domestic violence rates going up since COVID-19 had like struck, and how women were hit differently by coronavirus measures, because obviously when you're like quarantined with your abuser, like there's no escape. You can't say like, oh, I'm going to hang out with a friend or I'm going to go to the mall or something like that. You are trapped with them.
Mariella, I think we may have lost you. Can anyone hear Mariella? Oh, you're back. You're back.
My internet's unstable apparently. But where did I cut off?
Unsafe to be with your abuser.
Oh yeah. So then the last thing that I wrote about, why I wrote about it was because I read the news every day and I was just seeing things, and that's what I talked about in the journal. So I figured I should just write about for like my post because I couldn't come up with any ideas. So I thought I would like write about current news and stuff like that.
And Cedra, what did you do for the post?
I wrote a short thing on and being aware of your safety and others for your own health and survival, I think is the best way to put it. And how it had at the time it hadn't, like, it still, I feel like, hasn't quite hit people the way it should, that this is a serious thing, especially at the time when like a lot of places were still like before we had even started doing phases opening up where we are, at least. And so I took note of the things that were happening. People like going, like, at the time you weren't really supposed to visit friends because a lot was going on. Sorry, I keep on repeating the same thing. A lot of people were hoarding items. A lot of people were kind of getting into like little scuffles about the little things. A lot of people were spreading lies about not lies, but misinformation about things, and how basically, sorry.
That's awesome. And Luke, take us out.
Um, wait, can you repeat the question?
Totally. What did you do for our pandemic post like newspaper? What did you write about and how did you decide to do that?
The newspaper.
I know it was
Uh,
so long ago.
I don't remember that.
That's totally fine. No worries. Cool. Well, I guess now I'll see, does our audience have any questions?
I'll just jump in and read a question that came through our chat. And it is, if we could go back and do COVID over again, either you personally or CRLS as a whole, or our entire country, what would you want to do differently? That's a big one.
Can I answer
It
that
is.
one?
Start us off, Cedra.
I think it would be really amazing if we could get everyone on board with wearing a mask, staying 6 feet apart, especially from from everybody, and washing your hands and touch areas. I feel like if we at least did those 3 things, our numbers would be down by a lot, and if we could get everyone on board and do that, that would be amazing.
Someone else.
I would just want to keep everyone with a job, safely with a job, because I mean, I don't know how to say it, but I kind of think that this whole experience there's a lot of bad about it, but what we can get from it is more, in my opinion, probably going to be more important than how bad the experience was. So I just think that as long as we can keep people with jobs, or could have kept people working and bringing in money for their families, I don't really have anything else to change.
Thanks, Luke. Mariella, Grace, Esme, what you think?
I agree with Sisha that we should have like mandated masks like way earlier. Like I know I was wearing a mask in like February and like March, and Mr. Cohen was making fun of me for it. And everybody's like, Corona's not that serious. You don't need to wear a mask. It's not even here yet. And here we are. And I just like first like mask mandates, and I think that someone should like disable a certain someone's Twitter account, because like CJ was also saying, like misinformation is such a big thing, and there are so many like blind followers of that. And for CRLS, I feel like we should have taken it more seriously, and we should have probably talked about it more and like addressed it, because it was like already a pandemic in China and like Italy and stuff before it even like came here. Well, the first reported like coming here. And yeah, I think that's it.
Thanks. Grace or Esme?
I would say that I agree with everything that's been said by everyone else, and also just in general, like aside from taking action earlier as a country, I think that something that we should have done is trying to acknowledge and accommodate for all of the inequalities that exist in America and are being exacerbated by this pandemic. Like Mariella mentioned, domestic abuse. Someone else mentioned unemployment, and just like acknowledging that it does affect some people more than others, and trying to take some sort of action regarding that.
Esme?
Yeah, I think something that was hard for me at CRLS was that I feel like I didn't get a lot of the schoolwork that I would have gotten in person. So at CRLS specifically, I guess this is kind of a hard one because there was a lot of like uncertainty about how long we would be out of school and whatever. But I think if we had sort of come up with a way to do distance learning in a more efficient way, a little bit faster, it would have helped a lot with the students to sort of get the education that I feel like we kind of missed out on a lot this year.
Something that all you are saying is reminding me, and sort of related to Miss Martin's question that I think is a great one that we should answer in a second, but we were also out of school in sort of this historical reckoning after the murder of George Floyd. And I'm wondering how you felt like your teachers and your schooling and your school system grappled with addressing what was going on in this country in regards to the Black Lives Matter movement and to racism and police brutality with being out of school and therefore not together. So how did that look? Did you feel like you were able to express and think through what was going on, or did you feel like you didn't get those chances?
Can I go first? So I wrote about this to Noriel like yesterday, but I thought that it was handled very poorly. We didn't talk about it at all. Well, I talked about it in Mr. Cohen's class, but like if not for that, I wouldn't have. And I remember like the math dean or something had like told all the math teachers like, oh, hey, if you don't want to teach like class today and you want to talk about the recent events instead, you should do that. And my math teacher took that as like a mistranslation and like was like, oh, no class. So we just watched.
I think we lost you. Marielle? All right, maybe we'll come back and we'll loop you back in. Oh, you're back, Mariella.
So
Okay, keep going.
what did I say? Did
You're
I
talking about your math teacher. You were talking about your math teacher.
He was like, oh, no class. And he like gave us a 5-minute YouTube video to watch, and that was it. And we didn't get to talk about it. And I feel like if we were in school, we would have had like an assembly and like the talking circles that we did for like the Emily Dexter incident and things like that, like how we had like those support groups and stuff. But in school, we didn't really address it. And it wouldn't have been addressed if I wasn't in Mr. Cohen's class. And like maybe that was just me, but I remember that everybody else in the class was like, no, we didn't talk about it today. Like we didn't talk about it this week. And I don't know. I just thought that it was handled very poorly. Like there was like an email that was like, we stand. Did my internet cut out?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. So it was like we stand with like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, but it just felt kind of lame, and we didn't really get to like have the discussion that we would have had if we were in school. So I didn't really like that, but yeah.
Thank you. How about for the rest of y'all?
I think Mariella already said this, but like, I agree with Mariella, and especially with how, I relate with Mariella by her saying that Cohen was the only one in one of my teachers that actually addressed it. Like, I had one other teacher that like briefly mentioned it, but it was kind of like, it kind of felt like a shall like kind of like throw it out there question, not really meant to like be really looked into. And it just kind of felt brushed over by the majority of the by the majority of the school. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it went down. I don't know if there was any conversations amongst the teachers, but from my end and what I saw, it was not really talked about. And yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah. I did have a few teachers, I think half of my teachers talked about it. But I feel like it was sort of like the teachers who feel comfortable talking about this or want to talk about this, like you should, but it's not really like mandatory, and I feel like it was that sort of made it seem like it wasn't as important as it was. And I feel like it would have been nice to have a more like school-wide discussion or some sort of thing like that that sort of showed that like this is a really important event. We should be talking about this.
Grace, Luke, I don't want to cut you off if you have something to say.
I'll just quickly say that, yeah, I agree with pretty much what everyone's been saying. A couple teachers kind of glossed over it. There was like an email, and yeah, something that Mariella said that I really agree with is that there probably would have been a much bigger, or at least relatively larger response if we had been in school. And yeah, I think part of distance learning kind of took away some of the communication that was going on. So yeah.
Cool. All right, we have 2 questions. So let's do Ms. Martin's quick and then this next one, which is a mystery. Thinking about COVID as a major historical event, what would be important for people 100 years from now to know? What sources would tell them the most about your lives? That's a great question. Who's brave?
Well, I answered in chat privately, but I can reread my answer.
Yeah.
I said probably just to look at the videos that we're making now. There's nothing more compelling than than actually seeing a problem and its effects, than thinking about it yourself and trying to find a solution or a valuable note about what could have gone better and how you could influence that.
Awesome. Any other answers about what you would want people 100 years from now to know, and what would you tell them to look at to understand your lives right now?
I think definitely looking, like, definitely kind of sounds kind of cheesy, but like definitely look back at the mistakes, because there's a lot going on and mistakes happen, and I think instead of brushing them aside, I think they should really look at the mistakes and build off of the things that we did right, and continue to make progress in.
Awesome. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think something that's really great is that because like we can put things on the internet, is that like it's not just a one-sided story. There's so many different like opinions and the different experiences that are out there. And I think like things like this or that we did in school to sort of show how we're feeling are great resources that I want people to see if they were doing like a research paper or something about this time period.
Totally. And Miss Sewall, is that pronounced correctly? Sorry if that's wrong.
Yeah, you can call me Swarika. I'm only 20. I'm a CRLS alumna, class of 18. And I'm actually this summer working on a research project for my college, and it's all about how COVID-19 has been affecting coming of age for people in high school and college. And so I'm really curious, it's similar to Miss Martin's question, but I'm really curious about how you all, I assume you're all freshmen, I think, 9th graders or going into 10th grade. I just wanted to know, how have you sort of taken big like milestones, whether that's in your freshman year of high school, things that you were looking forward to, and how have you sort of adapted that, I guess, in this situation, since we've never really seen anything like it?
Grace, you want to go first?
Sure. So I think that definitely we haven't been affected as much as like seniors or juniors, or like they have these big like high school landmarks coming up and they had to miss them. But yeah, as far as like just the general high school experience, it I guess felt a little bit incomplete. Like we didn't get to really quite like entirely finish our freshman year. But I think that was kind of made up for in, or like at least partially made up for, in that we're at least kind of able to like branch out through like stuff like this, and like it's kind of increased our awareness, I suppose. I don't really have much an opinion on this because I don't feel like I've missed a whole lot, especially relative to other high school students. But yeah, that's just kind of my thought.
Thank you. Mariella, anything to add?
I like what she said. I don't think we've missed a lot, but I think like the question is like, what will we miss? Like, will we miss like prom? Like, is Corona gonna be like under control by then? Like, what's graduation gonna look like? And as for like freshman year sucked before and after Corona hit, so it didn't really make much of a difference to me. I was very at peace. I was almost like happy when we got out of school because I really like didn't want to see anybody anyway, and I kept in contact with the people that I did want to see, so I felt fine. It wasn't like for me because I don't really like have like a big friend group that I had to see every day. So yeah, I was content.
Cedra, what about you?
Definitely this being our this past year being our freshman year, it was kind of like we were getting used to the new school, and like that was like the first semester, and then like second semester we had like part of the second semester, well, I think it was half of the third quarter. Halfway through the third quarter, everything changed, and we were told that we'd come back in 2 weeks, which kept on being added on to until it was like, yeah, no more school. And then for the fourth quarter, they changed up our schedules again. They tried to make it more structured. It just kind of made everything more chaotic because like we had just finally gotten used to like, okay, maybe we can do this for like one more quarter, and then they changed it up again, and it was really chaotic, like trying to get used to everything over and over again. So yeah.
Luke, how about you? This question about milestones.
I don't think I have anything else to say. I think everything I was gonna say has already been covered.
Great. Esme?
Sorry. Yeah, I think, I mean, the last day of school was like extremely uneventful, because of the way we had our schedule set up. On the Wednesday, which ended up being the last day of school, we didn't have any classes, except for like a few teachers who were like, come and say hi and bye or whatever. But it was pretty much like, nothing happened. Whereas if we had gone to school, there would have been a lot of like, saying goodbye to friends or whatever. So I feel like that was a little bit like, all right, now it's summer, which doesn't seem like any different from what's been going on for the past like few months. I don't know if you'd be interested in hearing about like, I had a little brother who graduated from 5th grade, or like I had a birthday that just happened. Yeah.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, so my birthday was kind of weird because um, I actually did have like friends come over, and I have a big front yard, so I just had friends come over and like sit in my front yard and talk to me, it was fun to see them, but it was definitely different. And I had a little brother who he just graduated from 5th grade, and he is like, he had a bunch of teachers like drive by to all the different 5th graders, which was fun for him. But I think also he's starting middle school next year, and so there's going to be new students, and actually for him it's the same building, but I think it's going to be really different for him too, where for me, I'm not going to be I'm only moving up one grade, but I'm still in the same school. I think like the incoming freshmen are going to have a really hard time like adjusting to the new school, and meeting like all the other students, where there's a huge difference in the number of kids from middle school to high school, like 4 times. So I think that makes a really big difference, and will make a lot of difference for other people.
Totally. That sort of, I think, looking at the clock brings us to perhaps a really awesome place to stop, which would be to give us like really quick, what are your feelings about the year? So like it's August 3rd, school starts in a month-ish. Yeah, Ms. Camargo's face and my face are both like, uh-oh. So what are you feeling? Like, what are you hoping school will look like? And are you nervous, excited? What are your emotions as you start this roller coaster again? And let's go, Cedra, you go first.
Okay. I'm not really sure what I want, like whether I want hybrid or like full-on online learning, because there's pluses and minuses to both. Whatever it is going to be next year, it's going to be really crazy, especially in the beginning. I'm kind of interested in what semester is actually going to, second semester is going to look like more, like, because as time goes on, there's more likely that there's going to be more in-person stuff. Right now, from what I've been being told, we are most likely going to be doing it online, is what I've been told. I'm not 100% sure, but it's yeah, whatever it's going to be kind of crazy.
Totally. Luke, what about you? Where are you at?
I'm honestly hoping that it's hybrid, where school maybe starts at, well, maybe people will have different times to come in, and we might even have a third day, like black, silver, and maybe gold or something, where that gold day is for the, like, one of the classes that you switch up on, that would have been like black or white, and then have like the first 2 days be the solid classes you would just have regularly, and then the last day would be that the switched up class or classes. So it's like, so you come in for less time, not only, well, the actual time within a day, but less days in a week, which would just help to reduce the number of cases that we would probably be getting, and to just overall help separate everyone. And, well, it would either be that, or we just come in for the crucial things that we have to do in person and do everything else online.
All right. Mariella, what about you?
For me, I'm very, what's the word, like apathetic, I think. I don't really care. I mean, like, for me personally, I'd like rather not go to school just because I don't really like I just don't really like the social environment at school. But like going fully remote wouldn't be good for like everybody's mental health. And I know, like, with talking with my friends, like I had a friend who like hasn't left her house in like months, and like a lot of people just aren't going outside because they don't need to anymore. And that would just, I feel like we would see like a lot more like depression and anxiety with everybody if we were like fully online. But for hybrid, the thing about like having like the switching off days is that teachers would have to like go to work every day, I guess. And like if you have like a kid who's like in Cambridge or not in Cambridge, whatever, and like they're going on like AB days or something, but you're working every day, and they're coming home earlier than you, and they're just at home by themselves for hours, that would be a problem. And I think, I don't know, I mean, like, I'd want hybrid because it looks like the best option, because like we still get to have like the social environment while like staying at home. But my only concern, well, like not only, but like one of the concerns is just like the teachers with kids, because like how is that going to balance out for them? But yeah.
Great point. Grace and then Esme.
So for me, regardless of whether we're doing hybrid or remote, really just what I am hopeful for is some sense of normalcy. Like I feel like last year was really erratic with the schedule and everything, and I couldn't imagine doing what we did during remote learning for an entire year. I just don't think that would be very sustainable. So really, I'm just hoping for something that's effective in allowing students to absorb content, and I don't know, just some kind of new normal.
And Esme.
I'm thinking about this a lot because my mom is a high school teacher in at a high school near us. So I've been like having a lot of discussions with her about like what would work best. And I think if we're going to do hybrid, I think we really need to figure out a way that can work for a lot of people, because I feel like everybody sort of is in a different situation. Like with the students and also teachers, like it's going to be really hard to find a situation that works for everyone, and I don't think we can. But I think also if we're going to be doing completely remote learning, I think we really need to figure out a way that can help people to, like a method for the remote learning that can help us to sort of replicate more of the educational learning. And also, like, I think it would be great if we had some way of replicating the like social interactions that we also had in completely in-person learning. So I think there's a lot of thinking and figuring things out to do either way.
Totally. Well, I just first want to thank all 5 of you for showing up on your summer vacation at 6 p.m. It means so much, and y'all were amazing, 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 amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you again to Beth and the Cambridge Historical Society for having us.
And a huge thank you to Benji for doing such an amazing job moderating. It was phenomenal. I want to thank you all. You're so poised and well-spoken and thoughtful, and thank you for your insights and your honesty. And we're just so glad that we got to not only have this experience, but document it so that folks can hear what you guys in your generation are thinking. So I just want to thank everyone for being here in whatever way you participated. We're glad you joined us. And I'm going to be sending out a survey to those of you who registered about the experience of the program. We are on this digital learning curve. We are super excited to be bringing you programs like this. And we love your input and feedback so that we can continue to improve. So thank you all so much, and stay cool, have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.